All right, I'm Don Curtis, and this is the study of Isaiah, and today we are in chapter 10. But I want to go back to chapter 9 a little bit and kind of give the context of where we are at. Beginning in verse 8 of chapter 9, where it says, "The Lord sends a message against Jacob, and it falls on Israel. And all the people will know it, that is Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, asserting in pride and in arrogance of heart, the bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with smooth stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will replace them with cedars. Therefore Adonai raises against them adversaries from Rezin and spurs their enemies on, the Arameans on the east and the Philistines on the west, and they devour Israel with gaping jaws. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out." So Adonai has brought, first of all, we have, if you remember, we have a northern kingdom of 10 tribes of Israel. We have the southern kingdom, which is Judah and Benjamin. Okay, this happened right after King Solomon. His son came along, created some controversy. The kingdom split into two kingdoms. So we have the northern kingdom, which is always known by Israel, Samaria, Ephraim, those synonyms. We have the southern kingdom, which is Judah. So 8 through 12 is referring to the northern kingdom. That's why it references Samaria and Ephraim. Those are synonyms for the northern kingdom. And it says that Adonai brought an incursion, a military incursion into Israel to wake it up, to shake it up, to, as it says there, the Lord sends a message against Jacob. And that message came through a military incursion. The military incursion destroyed a couple cities, and their response is, the bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with smooth stones. We'll make it better than ever. And instead, what Adonai wants them to do is to repent, to come back to him. But they refuse to do that. So we have this picture of, in spite of this, his anger does not turn away. His hand is still stretched out, which is stretched out to smack them again. So verses 8 through 12, 13 through 17, 18 through 21, are various aspects of the striking that is happening in Ephraim. It's only the first one, interestingly enough, that talks about military incursions, a continuing of military incursions. The rest of it is all internal decay. 13 through 17 is the internal decay of the leadership in the northern kingdom. The head is the elder, the honorable man, and the prophet who teaches falsehood is the tail. For those who guide this people are leading them astray, and those who are guided by them are brought to confusion. So, the leadership is becoming confused. Adonai is withdrawing his wisdom from the leadership. Mm-hmm. 18 through 21 is an increase in wickedness within the country. So we first start with the military incursion. We then have the withdrawing of wisdom from its leaders. Then we have an increase of wickedness among the people. And you can see this in verse 18. "For wickedness burns like a fire. It consumes briars and thorns. It even sets the thickets of the forest aflame, and they roll upward in a column of smoke." Meaning the internal wickedness is creating as much distress inside the country as a war might cause. 21 is interesting, or 20 is interesting, 20 and 21. "They slice off what is on the right hand, but still are hungry. And they eat what's on the left hand, but they are not satisfied. Each of them eats the flesh of his own arm." I mean, the people are at a point where they don't even know what's good for them. They're actually doing things that are not good for them at all, that are in fact devouring who they could be, what their supplies, what can make them content. 21, "Manasseh devours Ephraim, Ephraim, Manasseh, and together they are against Judah." And then this tagline again, "In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out." It's a very, like I said, it's very graphic. It's just like, it reminds me of when I was a parent of young children, and my hand is upraised because I'm going to provide the instruction to my children. And then at when we get to chapter 10, 1 through 4, we have again, just the fact that even the laws, the the chance for justice and things like that, the society becomes completely unjust. And in 10, woe to those who enact evil statutes, and to those who constantly record unjust decisions, so as to deprive the needy of justice and rob the poor of my people of their rights, so that the widows may be their spoil, and that they may plunder the orphans. So the leadership is actually at the point where it is systemically robbing the poor and depriving justice of the poor. I mean, it is just a gold mine of loot and booty and things like that. They're consuming their own people. So then verse 3 just says, now what will you do in the day of punishment, and in the devastation which will come from afar? To whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your wealth? Nothing remains but to crouch among the captives or fall among the slain. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away and his hand is still stretched out. He says the final endgame here is, I am going to bring someone who's going to lead you all into captivity. And those of you who have been enacting the unjust laws, depriving the poor of my rights and so forth, you are just going to be walking along with them, equal to equal, equally devastated, and really the nation here, as the Assyrians just cart you off into exile. Interesting twist here, though, because here when it says, in spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, his hand is still stretched out. The target of his anger shifts from verse 4 to verse 5, where he says, woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, and in the staff in whose hand is my indignation. So Adonai is saying, I am raising up Assyria to do the deed with the northern kingdom, with Ephraim. Okay? He is my rod. He is the rod of my anger. When I talk about my hand being upraised, well, there's a rod in my hand, and that rod is the Assyrian Empire. But why does he say woe to the Assyrian Empire? It's because Adonai has prescribed what he wants Assyria to do, which is deal with the northern kingdom. The leader of Assyria says, I don't want to stop there. I mean, I'm going to give you the flow of the chapter, then we'll look at the details. Adonai says, Assyria, I need you to clobber the northern kingdom. The Sennacherib of Assyria says, but I want the southern kingdom too. And that is the reason why Adonai says, woe to you, because if you go there, I'm going to have to clobber you, and I will. And that really is the net of the rest of this chapter. There's some interesting little twists and turns that we'll get into, but this is essentially it. Okay, woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, and the staff in whose hand is my indignation. I have taught through all 5 of the major prophets. Isaiah, this is like my 5th time through Isaiah. I've taught, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. I've been once through Jeremiah, twice through Ezekiel, maybe 3 times through Ezekiel. I've been several times through Lamentations, Daniel a couple times. And I've given summaries of all the minor prophets. I have specialized in my own personal study. I specialize in the prophets. And this notion here of Adonai raising up this nation and that nation and so forth to do his bidding is all over. But there's different twists and turns. Before I go into the woe to Assyria, I want to go to a future time, and I'm going to go to Jeremiah. And here I want to go to Jeremiah chapter 40. The context here is that Nebuchadnezzar, who was another rod in Adonai's hand, this time to come against the southern kingdom. But there's an interesting twist in Nebuchadnezzar and so forth, in that through the workings of Adonai, there's this man named Daniel who is in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, a godly Jewish man who provides counsel to Nebuchadnezzar. And we can see the result of that counsel in these chapters here, in chapter 40 here. First of all, the fact that Nebuchadnezzar actually knew his purposes from Adonai. This is one of the first things we're going to read. This is Jeremiah chapter 40. The words which came to Jeremiah from Adonai after Nebuzaradan, captain of the bodyguard, had released him from Ramah, when he had been taken bound in chains among all the exiles of Jerusalem and Judah who were being led to exile to Babylon. Now the captain of the bodyguard had taken Jeremiah and said to him, Adonai, your God, promised this calamity against this place. And Adonai has brought it on and done just as he promised, because you people sinned against Adonai and did not listen to his voice. Therefore, this thing has happened to you. Okay, so Nebuzaradan, this is information that has come from Nebuchadnezzar to the captain of his bodyguard and things like that. And so, now, the army of Nebuchadnezzar has been besieging Jerusalem for 18 months, and armies need to be fed. Okay, so where do you think typically an army would get its food?
Surrounding land.
From the surrounding land. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar had such a sense of purpose. By the way, Nebuchadnezzar, according to the book of Daniel, became saved. He got to a point where he acknowledged Adonai as his king, greater than he, and so forth. So there was a humility about Nebuchadnezzar that may in fact have been in effect even as this is going on. So I want you to drop down. Now this devastation of Jerusalem happened in around July. Okay, and there's a fall harvest that could come up. And note, if you drop down to verse 12, then all the Jews returned from all the places to which they had been driven away and came to the land of Judah to Gedaliah at Mizpah, and gathered in wine and summer fruit in great abundance. Nebuchadnezzar left the crops.
He must have.
He left the crops. I mean, there's a couple different ways that these leaders who are raised up to do Adonai's bidding, some of them, like Nebuchadnezzar, understood what his purposes were and had compassion in the execution, because he left the crops. He carted all the people up. What was left behind were the poorest of the poor. And Nebuchadnezzar ordered them to be given property, and then they had a great harvest of wine and summer fruit. It's kind of extraordinary. Now, we come back to Assyria. It's totally just the opposite. The Assyrian commander has been given a commission, and he decides he really wants to go much further than that. So let's get back to Isaiah 10, verse 5. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, and the staff in whose hands is my indignation. I send it against a godless nation, and commission it against the people of my fury, to capture booty, and to seize plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. Yet it does not so intend, nor does it plan so in its heart, but rather it is its purpose to destroy and to cut off many nations. I'm sending it against one. This guy wants to go against many. For it says, are not my princes all kings? Is not Kano like Carchemish, or Hamath like Arpad, or Samaria like Damascus? And he's saying, like I'm coming down and I'm going to destroy this one, and that one is going to be just like this one, and that one's going to be just like this one, and that one's going to be just like this one, and I'm just going to have my military campaign picking off all these cities. As my hand has reached to the kingdoms of the idols, whose graven images were greater than those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not do to Jerusalem and her images just as I have done to Samaria and her idols? And here's the key. He wants to go against Jerusalem. Adonai has sent him against Samaria, and all these other places like Damascus and Hamath and Arpad and so forth, those are just cities on the way to Samaria. So he's not picking them off. He comes against Samaria, he conquers Samaria, and then he says, you know what? These idols that I've been conquering, these idols are greater gods than that Yahweh, that Jehovah who's in Jerusalem. So why not? I'm gonna go pick off Jerusalem and expand my empire all the more. Okay, so in verse 12 it says, so it will be that when the Lord has completed all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the fruit of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the pomp of his haughtiness.
That's a question. Is this a prophecy about what's going to happen?
Yes, it is.
Well, then the Lord is prophesying or through Isaiah, that this king is going to come against Jerusalem.
Yes.
So it's not like, okay, this is a decision I just made. The Lord is literally,
He's
at this point, saying that this is what the guy's going to do.
Yes, very true. Exactly, that's exactly right. It's contemporary prophecy. It's a little bit like when I make my suppositions, and they're really just suppositions. I'm not in Isaiah where I could say, "Thus says Adonai." He's told me this. But it would be like saying that if I were begin to describe to you, "Thus says Adonai," this nation is going to move against this nation, and begin to describe the flow of history with the EU and things like that, with a certitude that Isaiah had. I would be, Adonai would be telling me that, and I'd be communicating it to you, and then we would just sit back and watch it happen. So at this juncture, Assyria is an ascending power. I think Isaiah sees it as an ascending power, and Adonai is saying, this is why I'm raising Assyria up. He needs to come against the northern kingdom. He's also going to make an incursion, as you just indicated, into Jerusalem. And as soon as my purposes for the Jerusalem incursion are complete, I'm going to do away with them. Okay? And really, as a prophecy, it gets really very exact. I mean, when we get to page 1109 in my Bible, I will see exactly how exact it is. 13 is interesting. For he has said, by the power of my hand and by my wisdom I did this. For I'm going to use this is Sennacherib. He's the Assyrian ruler. For I, Sennacherib, have understanding. And I removed the boundaries of the peoples and plundered their treasures, and like a mighty man I brought down their inhabitants, and my hand reached to the riches of the people like a nest, as one abandoned eggs. I gathered all the earth, and there was not one that flapped its wing or opened its beak or chirped, because I am so great, I'm so powerful, I am it. So that unlike Nebuchadnezzar, who sort of had an understanding that he was serving the purposes of Adonai, Sennacherib is saying, I'm doing this on my own. It is by my authority, my power, my understanding, and so forth that I'm doing this. To which Adonai says in verse 15, is the axe to boast itself over the one who chops with it? Adonai is the chopper. Assyria is the axe. Adonai is the chopper. Is the axe to boast itself over the one who chops with it? Is the saw to exalt itself over the one who wields it? I mean, it's ridiculous even in the statement, because I mean, you look at a saw, and a saw is absolutely worthless unless some carpenter picks it up and just starts doing this with it. Assyria is just doing what Adonai wants, but it's just that this is just like a little while ago we had grapes that had free will. We have an axe that has free will that's saying, I'm the one who's doing this. I mean, he comes down and he hits a blow and he says, boy, wasn't that a great blow that I just did? Therefore, the Lord, the God of hosts, will send a wasting disease among his stout warriors, and under his glory a fire will be kindled like a burning flame. And the light of Israel will become a fire, and his Holy One a flame, and it will burn and devour his thorns and his briars in a single day. And he will destroy the glory of his forest and of his fruitful garden, both soul and body, and it will be as when a sick man wastes away. And the rest of the trees of his forest will be so small in number that a child could write them down. Okay. Now let's go to see what actually happened here, because let's go to Isaiah chapter 37. Now let's start with 36. We're not going to, this covers a couple chapters, but we're just going to read little bits and pieces of it. But 36 verse 1. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and sieged them. And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem to King Hezekiah with a large army, and he stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. So a specific place in Jerusalem.
Now are we talking history?
This is history. This is history.
Got
Okay.
it.
Here we have the prophecy. In Isaiah 10 we have the prophecy, which just so happens that in Isaiah 36 and 37 we have what actually happened. All right. Now, this little thing here about the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. We've seen this before already. And this is in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 3. Then Adonai said to Isaiah, "Go out to meet Ahaz, you and your son Shear-Yashub," which means a remnant will return, "at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field." So even when Isaiah is bringing his son Shear-Yashub, a remnant, to return to meet Ahaz at this particular place, it happens to be the place where Sennacherib comes to talk to the king of Judah later on. And so forth. So it's just, small little connection there. I don't know that it means much more than, as a coincidence, it speaks to us of Jeremiah's prowess as a prophet, or the way that God engineered things. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to him. Then Rabshakeh said to them, "Say now to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, what is this confidence that you have?" And there's this back and forth. All right. We're going to jump forward to chapter 37, where Hezekiah, this is how Hezekiah deals with the taunt of Sennacherib. He says, "When Hezekiah heard it, he tore his clothes, covered himself with sackcloth, and entered the house of Adonai. Then Eliakim, who was over the household, with Shebna the scribe and the elders, covered. Then he sent Eliakim and so forth to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos. Say to him, thus says Hezekiah, this day is a day of distress, rebuke, and rejection, for children have come to birth, and there is no strength to deliver." Meaning, I can't go out against this army. We're dead. There's Hezekiah's looking at this, saying, we don't have much hope here. And then there's a little bit of back and forth here, and Rabshakeh sends a letter to Hezekiah with a taunt. And then in 14, I love this. Then Hezekiah took the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it, and he went up to the house of Adonai and spread it out before Adonai. So here is the proud taunt of Sennacherib in a letter. And, Hezekiah doesn't send any response back. He takes it to his king, spreads it out. And he prayed to Adonai, saying, Adonai of hosts, remember, hosts is armies, Adonai of armies, you who have the power to intervene for us. God of Israel, who is enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, in all the kingdoms of the earth. Of all the kingdoms of the earth, you have made heaven and earth. See, there's a lot of our hope is based on the fact that Adonai is the creator of heaven and earth, because that's what shows his wisdom. When you look at the incredible wisdom of the operations of the universe and so forth, right there, when you study that, you get an idea that Adonai's wisdom, his genius, everything else far exceeds anything that we know. And therefore, we can trust him in the ways and means of history. So, incline your ear, Adonai, and hear. Open your eyes, Adonai, and see. You got to love this, right? God is omnipotent. God is omniscient. What's he saying here? Can you hear? Can you see? Can you look? Can you look at our situation? I've covered this before, but this is a good time to do this. See, we're in one of these places where we're talking an awful lot about God's sovereignty and how he lifts up nations and things like that. But there's more to the scriptures than this. There's actually three main theologies, and there's three. They're given names. I always hesitate to use the names because as soon as you use the name, there's division. So I'm not going to even use the names now. I'm just going to describe what they are. One is what I've been talking about now: God's sovereignty. Nothing happens except that God is in control, engineering events, steering events, and so forth. The scriptures are really big on this. And, I could take you through all kinds of scriptures there. But then there's these other scriptures that, for example, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. And you look at that and you say, well, that certainly sounds like we as a whosoever are choosing to believe in Messiah for our salvation. If God gives a commandment, do this, it presumes free will to do that we have choice. So in spite of all this talk, and even here we see it a little bit with Sennacherib, where God says, well, I want you to do this. And Sennacherib is saying, well, that's fine, but I want to do this. And he is exercising an internal choice within him. We see a connection between those two there. So let's just say that we have God's sovereignty, free will, choice, the ability to choose and make a difference. And then we have what Hezekiah is doing here. And I will give the name here because it's not really, it's a stupid name, but it's called open theology. And it says that God intentionally limits himself. He's technically omniscient, but he makes himself like not omniscient so that we can pray things like this. Okay, Moses, when God came to him one time and said, those people, they put that golden calf up, they're worthless. I want you to step aside. I'm going to wipe them all out, and I'm going to start all over again with you. And if Moses had not prayed what he did, we'd be speaking of the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, because he would have been a fourth patriarch. Instead, Moses says, God, Adonai, you need to think about your reputation. If you wipe these people out, all the surrounding nations are going to think that's why you brought them out here. Do you want that rap? Do you want people saying that you brought all these people out just to wipe them out? Do you want that? Now, it's not in the text, but you get the sense where God says, well, I guess really I don't. So I guess I'll leave them around. You talked me into this. Now, these three things, you're not going to bring these together in a nice, logical package. Not going to happen. All I can tell you is that you have to live your life as if they are all 100% completely true. When life is crashing down around your ears, you got to know that God's in control. You got to know that he has his plans and his purposes, and none of it is going to be in vain. But today you have choices that you have to make. And those choices very often have a right and a wrong component to it. And you have to make those choices as if those are real choices, and you are going to take responsibility for the outcome of those choices. You can't make a choice and have it all go to pot and say, well, guess that's what God wanted. You make your choices, you look at what happened, and you take responsibility for the choices. But the person that is harmed by your choices might be the one who says, well, I guess God has planned this for me. And then we pray like this, where we say, Adonai, you need to do this, and here's why. We just come up, God is our friend, we come up alongside and says, this is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it, and expect him to be reasonable. Remember back in the first chapter of Isaiah, come now, let us reason together. Let's talk about this, okay? All right, now my illustration for this is you take out a piece of paper, you draw a circle, and you draw a square. And you ask yourself, can the circle be the square at the same time? Okay? Can't be done. But then you take that piece of paper. And actually, I prefer, actually, for this illustration, I want you to think now of a full roll of toilet paper. Okay? Okay? And you hold it like this on the ends, you look at it straight there, and there you have this square. And you turn it around, and there you have this circle. So what is impossible in 2 dimensions becomes easy in 3 dimensions. Okay? Square can't be a circle in 2 dimensions. A square can be a circle called a cylinder in 3 dimensions. We live in the dimension of time. Okay? Pure and simple. I mean, I can't go back tomorrow. I can't leap forward to today. We're just in this room. I mean, this is us. This is moment by moment is passing while we're in this room. But Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. That's a profound statement. Before Abraham was. So before Abraham was even born, I am present at that point in time. So that clearly, Jesus is clearly living in a dimension where time, if I could say that this is like we're stuck going like this, but Adonai, time is, you can do all kinds of things with it. Okay, how many times has a prayer of yours been answered that required that Adonai have already done something in the past for that answer to happen? Okay.
Can I ask a question on
Yeah.
this? In those three types, where does prayer fit in all three? In other words, how would you, if you're talking full sovereignty, where would prayer fit in that?
Well, that's where the fact that like here, let's look at what Hezekiah is saying in verse 37:17. Incline your ear, O Lord. You need to hear me. Okay. I mean, Hezekiah could be all theological here and say, Adonai, you know what's going on. I expect you to do something. But I mean, here he's actually making a request. Here, see. This is a very human. This is a very person-to-person connection here. So the thing is that, like I said, we have to live our lives as if they're all true. If I need to make a choice, I can go to Adonai and say, Adonai, and James, you promised me wisdom. I need wisdom now. I just need it. I need to know what to do. And you expect the wisdom, and he provides the wisdom.
So if an event is happening, and it is under one of these views, the will of God happening, and you're going to pray, and you're saying, this is happening, what do I pray? Because I don't want this to happen in my own mind, but if it's the will of God, then maybe I should not intervene.
Or, see, if it's in your heart to intervene, if it's in your heart that this should flow this particular way, you go before Adonai and you say, Adonai, this is what needs to happen, and here's why. Okay, I mean, and I even think that here's why is an important concept, because it shows that you are thinking about it and engaging. I want to go forward to a section which is kind of strange even from a prophetic viewpoint. And this, by the way, is where I got a word for Ken the other week. This is Isaiah 44. Because, like I said, there's the God's sovereignty, but then there's also a partnership, and then there's also free choice. And like I said, they're all in the scriptures, therefore you have to believe them all, and you have to live as if they're all true. What you do is you forget trying to noodle it out. Okay, but this is interesting here, because Adonai is talking about prophets. And he, in verse 24, this is Isaiah 44, verse 24. Thus says Adonai, your Redeemer, and the one who formed you from the womb. Now, by the way, he's talking about a guy named Cyrus here. We don't know that yet, but that's what he's doing. I, Adonai, am the maker of all things, stretching out the heavens by myself and spreading out the earth all alone, causing the omens of boasters to fail, making fools out of diviners, causing men to draw back and turning their knowledge into foolishness. So Adonai is saying, if there's a false prophet out there, even if he were to prophesy something that I was maybe intending on doing, I might just not do it because it's from whose mouth it came. Okay, causing the omens of boasters to fail. In other words, the boast is, in a sense, determining what Adonai is going to do in some strange way. This is one that's cool. Confirming the word of his servant and performing the purpose of his messengers. All right, now note the phrasing here. Confirming the word of his servant, the prophet who speaks a word, and because this prophet speaks in Adonai's name, Adonai says, I'm going to give preference to what that prophet has spoken. And he goes on to make this stronger, and performing the purpose of his messengers. Okay, we would expect this to say, the messengers are performing the purposes of Adonai, but Adonai says, confirming the word of his servant, and performing the purpose of his messengers. Okay, right? So, okay.
That's amazing, because
That
what
is
it
amazing.
says is that our prayers and even a prophetic word spoken can actually be empowered by God, but if it wasn't spoken, then maybe it wouldn't happen.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And like I said, take it. You got to take it all as true. There is a. I've described it this way a little bit too, and this is in terms of salvation. You're walking down the broad path, you know, the broad path that Jesus talks about, and all of a sudden you see this narrow path over here, right? And there's a sign on that narrow path that says, "All who will may enter." And you say, that looks like a good path. And you choose to take that path. And you walk through the path, you open the door, you walk through it, and you're on this path, and it's narrow, but it's a good path, and you look back, and that door that you just walked through has this sign above it, chosen from before the foundation of the world. Okay, because that's what happens. Okay, there's a sense that as we're going through time, and there's another brilliance, and you need to get out some layman level book on quantum mechanics, okay? Because there's something that's brilliant in the internal structure of the way the universe is made. We know that if I take a baseball and I hit it with a bat, that through Newtonian physics, I can pretty much calculate where that ball's going to land. You know, I have the speed of the ball coming to me, I have the angle and, you know, the force with which I've hit the ball. We know masses, and force equals mass times acceleration, and we can calculate air resistance and little winds here and there, and we can, through Newtonian mechanics, know where that ball is going to land. But it comes down that when you get down to the atomic level, things are a lot more random. And there's crazy things that go on down there. You know, as a matter of fact, they get so crazy that there is this, okay, this is a huge money trail. Okay, but I'm going to tell you about Schrodinger's cat. Have you ever heard about Schrodinger's cat?
Yeah.
Okay. My kids who know my character, they're the ones who got me my coffee mug that have all the math formulas on it, and they also bought me a t-shirt that on the front says Schrodinger's cat is dead, and on the back it says Schrodinger's cat is not dead. Okay. And this is because of a thought experiment where you take a cat, and I don't know why it's a cat, but you know, probably Schrodinger didn't like cats. You take a cat, you put it in a box, and you have a little hammer that will strike a vial of poison if a particular quantum event happens. Because quantum events are unpredictable. They are outside Newtonian mechanics. And you put a lid on the box, and you set the timer, and at the time, when the timer is over, you flip another switch that deactivates the whole circuit. And Schrodinger will tell you, he was a physicist, and he says this in dead seriousness, that until there is an observer who observes what happens in that box, that cat is neither alive nor dead. And by observer, it means that like if you put your ear to hear if it's purring, or if you have a sound recorder to hear if there was a hammer strike or things like that, those are all observations. But without an observation, what happened, because it was tied to a quantum event, is in a state of flux. The wave function hasn't collapsed. Okay? Now these are physicists that are speaking this way. And you know, really when they're speaking this way, they are speaking of the same kinds of contradictions that I'm speaking of here. You know, in the physical realm among quantum physicists, there are strange things that are going on that they do not understand, but all the equations work out. I mean, that's a crazy thing. Our phones have GPS in them, okay? GPS works because quantum mechanics works. You know, they have to take into account, you know, the ideas of quantum mechanics. These formulas of quantum mechanics contain the imaginary number, the square root of -1. It's a strange, strange world. But it ends up with the same kinds of problems that we have when we try to deal with this theology stuff. Quantum mechanics is why prayer works. Because it's, you know, Newtonian physics was all mechanics. I mean, strict, force equals ma. You hit something, it's going to end up at a place. And they would say, scientists would say, well, how can there possibly be free will? You read some books about quantum mechanics, not only are they saying there's such a thing as free will, But there's one quantum physicist, and this is no lie, and he was well respected. His name is John Wheeler, who said that the universe sprang into existence in a second because all of a sudden there was an observer there to see it. And as soon as that observer saw the universe, the entire history of the universe collapsed right there on the spot. And he's serious. He's being taken seriously. So it's fun. I mean, you go into science, it's fun. You go into theology, it's fun. And it's all the genius and the wonder and the glory of God. All right, but anyway, back to Isaiah 37. And I'm sorry for... No, I'm not sorry. All right. So anyway, so Hezekiah says in verse 37:17, "Incline your ear, O Adonai, and hear. Open your eyes, O Adonai, and see, and listen to all the words of Sennacherib, who sent them to reproach the living God." All right, Adonai knows what Second Sennacherib wrote. You know, Hezekiah doesn't have to say, "Hey, would you look at this?" But he is, and it's, you know, it's an effective way to pray. You know, which is, let me show you what's going on. Let me describe this to you in my terms, and you know, suggest what you should do. So he says, "Truly, O Adonai, the kings of Assyria have devastated all the countries and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire." Remember that Sennacherib way back said, "Oh, all these other gods are greater than Adonai in Jerusalem." So here's Hezekiah saying, look, he is claiming that he has been victorious over all these other gods. He is saying that this is a battle not between him and me, but between his gods and you. So truly, O Adonai, the kings of Assyria have devastated all the countries and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, for they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone, so have they destroyed them. Now, Adonai, our God, deliver us from his hand, that all the kingdom of the earth may know that you alone, Adonai, are God. Deliver us so that the nations will know. Back in Moses' day, you know, don't wipe them out so the nations won't have a bad view of you. So Hezekiah puts this all on the reputation of God again. So Adonai, in fact, does answer this. And here we'll drop down to verse 36. Then the angel of Adonai went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians, and when men arose early in the morning, behold, all these were dead. So this is what, if we go back to Isaiah chapter 10, he says, verse 16, "Therefore the Lord Adonai of hosts will send a wasting disease among his stout warriors." Adonai predicted it. Now notice this flow here. Here's a prophecy of Isaiah. Adonai is going to send a wasting disease. Hezekiah has this letter before Adonai, and he's saying, hey, look at this letter. You need to deliver us so that the world nations may know that you are God. And then, as a result of Hezekiah's prayer, Adonai sends a wasting disease, as he had prophesied, on 185,000 people. Okay? So this is a world. You know, Adonai is king. You know, but we are free agents, and we can reason with him and so forth. All right. Oh, what time is it? I've got 9 minutes. Now in that day, I'm back in Isaiah 10, verse 20. Now in that day, the remnant of Israel and those of the house of Jacob who have escaped will never again rely on the one who struck them, but will truly rely on Adonai, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return. Shear Yashub, remember? Shear Yashub, who is by the fuller's field and so forth, who when Sennacherib is there, they're having this discussion at the fuller's field. Okay, the remnant will return. Shear Yashub. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. For though your people, O Israel, may be like the sand of the sea, only a remnant within them will return. A destruction is determined, overflowing with righteousness. The destruction is determined, overflowing with righteousness. Through the destruction, Adonai will create the righteousness. He always has, this is the end game of all this that goes on. For a complete destruction, one that is decreed, Adonai, God of hosts, will execute it in the midst of the whole land. And I think here he still is talking about Assyria here. Now I'm going to just finish up and read the next section. I may have a couple more things to say, but I want to finish up this section because he's still talking about Assyria. And it's still kind of the same message. It says, 24, therefore thus says Adonai, God of hosts, O my people who dwell in Zion, do not fear the Assyrian who strikes you with the rod and lifts up his staff against you the way Egypt did. See, even here, the people are told not to fear. It's coming, but do not be afraid, because I'm in control. For in a little while my indignation against you will be spent, and my anger will be directed to their destruction. Adonai of hosts will arouse a scourge against him like the slaughter of Midian at the rock of Oreb, and his staff will be over the sea, and he will lift it up by the way he did in Egypt. This reference to Midian and Oreb is Gideon. Remember Gideon, who had a great army, and Adonai said, well, you have too many there. So the first thing Gideon said is, okay, all of you who want to go home, go home. And I think he lost about every except 300. Then a little bit later, Adonai says, well, look at how the guys are drinking. The ones who are lapping with their mouth in the water, send them home. The ones that are with their hands going like this, keep them. Gideon had 100. And with that 100, he defeated the entire Midian army. And obviously that was at the hand of Adonai. So this is a reminder here that Adonai doesn't need a lot of people to destroy an army. That's the message there. So it will be in that day that his burden will be removed from your shoulders and his yoke from your neck, and the yoke will be broken because of fatness. Meaning because you will, you will prosper economically and things like that. And then he has another little tale of Sennacherib's travels. He has come against Aoth. He has passed through Migron. At Michmash he deposited his baggage. They've gone through the pass, saying, Geba will be our lodging. Ramah is terrified, and Gibeah of Saul has fled away. Cry aloud with your voice, O daughter of Galim. Pay attention, Laishah and wretched Anathoth. Madmenah has fled. The inhabitants of Gebim have sought refuge. Yet today he will halt at Nob. He shakes his fist at the mountain of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem, and he's not going to go any further. Because Adonai says, behold, Adonai, the God of hosts, will lop off the boughs with a terrible crash. Those also who are tall in stature will be cut down, and those who are lofty will be abased. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an iron axe, and Lebanon will be the fall of the mighty one. The mighty one being Sennacherib. The references to trees and forests and axes is like, okay, Sennacherib, you were my axe. You're not my axe anymore. I, the axe, will lop down your trees. And Sennacherib is no more. And then we'll pick up chapter 11 next week. It's in the same section, but it is a whole different sentiment, because we're going to go back to the good parts, the Messianic kingdom, and what it's going to be like when Messiah reigns on the earth. But this is, and just to kind of give you a little review of where we've been. Chapter 1's like an introductory chapter. Chapter 2 is when we were introduced to all the nations coming into Zion to meet with Messiah the King, Adonai of hosts, to receive justice, and on the basis of that justice there will be peace. Then we flowed from there to a section through chapter 6 where he was developing the wickedness of the people, the depravity of the people, and the fact that he was going to whistle for the king of Assyria to come against them. Then through 6, 7, 8, and half of 9, we have the development of Isaiah, his children, his ministry, and things like that they were all symbols. In the center of that, which is almost the center of this whole section, there's this other little prophecy that comes up, for unto us a child is born, which again talks about, Adonai reigning as king in Jerusalem, and of the increase of his government there will be no end. A little promise right in the middle that says, this is the goal. And then we go back to Assyria, and all this development of Assyria that we've covered these last 2 weeks. Assyria is no more. And now we go back almost to the last days again. In chapter 2, it's in the last days the peoples will come up to see Adonai in Jerusalem. 11 is a last days Messianic kingdom prophecy again. So we have Messianic kingdom. We have Assyria, we have the child who's born to us. This is the way Isaiah likes to structure his book. Ends, middles, center. And it's we will just see this over and over again. And it's fascinating. Isaiah was okay. The Quran is described as being dictated. The Book of Mormon is described as being dictated. And it's as if that because it's dictated from heaven, it's got to be just the best stuff around. What you see in the prophets, and especially with Isaiah, is a word that's given to the prophet, and then the prophet crafts it into a message. And what Isaiah liked to do is he liked to structure his message with all of this, what's called a chiastic structure, A, B, C, C, B, A. He just loved to do that, and you can tell that he just put a lot of thought into it. When we get to the last 27 chapters, it is a single executed work that is of absolute genius, and unfortunately we're a couple months away from there. But it's an amazing work in terms of its language, in terms of its structure, in terms of its message, and it's a complete unfolding of the future glory of Israel. And I will tell you that we live in the days of the last 9 chapters, and I'll show you why that's true, and even the evidence for certain key prophecies in those 9 chapters that are taking place today. And you'll be excited. Okay. Anyway, thank you all. And thank you to our listening to this from YouTube.